From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I'm so happy to be here today, nearing the 5th anniversary of the floods in Katrina, to talk about this amazing production called Swimming Upstream, which is filled with and created by the voices of the women of New Orleans, which really gives testimony and gives a legacy and gives the depth of soul and feelings that the women felt during and after the flood.
Award-winning playwright Eve Ensler. She's the creator of the Vagina Monologues and V-Day, the global movement to stop violence against women and girls. She's marking the 5th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina by staging performances of her new work, Swimming Upstream, in New Orleans and Harlem. Today, she joins us in our studio for the hour to talk about the flood, the systematic rape in the Congo, and her own personal battle with cancer. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The death toll from a string of attacks across Iraq Wednesday has surpassed 50, with nearly 200 people wounded. Earlier today, 8 members of a U.S.-backed Sunni militia were killed in eastern Iraq. The attacks follow the recent withdrawal of some 14,000 U.S. troops, leaving just under 50,000 in Iraq for the first time since the 2003 invasion. The White House, meanwhile, has announced President Obama will give a televised address Tuesday night to mark the end of U.S. combat missions in Iraq, even though U.S. forces will continue to fight. A top Afghan official at the center of a corruption scandal in Afghanistan is reportedly on the payroll of the CIA. The official, Mohammed Zia Salehi, was arrested on bribery charges last month, but set free after Afghan President Hamid Karzai intervened. According to the New York Times, Salehi has received CIA payments for many years of unspecified work. The payments have continued despite the Obama administration's stated commitment to root out corruption in the Afghan government. A U.S. official defended the CIA's ties to Salehi, saying, quote, "If we decide we'll never deal with anyone in Afghanistan who might put his hand in the till, we can all come home right now. If you want intelligence in a war zone, you're not going to get it from Mother Teresa or Mary Poppins," they said. The ongoing hysteria over a proposed Islamic cultural center near Ground Zero appears to be fueling anti-Muslim attacks both here in New York and nationwide. A New York City taxi driver was stabbed multiple times Tuesday after a drunken passenger determined he was Muslim. The victim, Ahmed Sharif, was slashed across his face, his neck, and his hands. Sharif says the suspect, Michael Enright, had asked him several questions about his religion, including whether he's a Muslim observing Ramadan. Enright recently returned from Afghanistan, where he was filming U.S. troops for a documentary. As he attacked Sharif, Enright is said to have yelled, quote, "Consider this a checkpoint." Enright was arraigned Wednesday on multiple charges, including felony attempted murder as a hate crime. Bharavi Desai of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance told Democracy Now! That from his hospital bed, Sharif had asked her to warn other Muslim drivers to be fearful in the current political climate.
And the first thing he said to me was, "We have to get the message out, because we can't let this escalate. Drivers need to protect themselves." He said the environment right now is very serious. There is no doubt in our minds that the fear-mongering and the ignorance and the hatred that has been spewing around this Islamic cultural center, which has erroneously been called the Ground Zero Mosque, we have no doubt that it's that hatred that's risen to the surface and that's led to this violence. And all of these has-been politicians, you know, who around the country, who have been making a bigger issue out of this, that man's blood is on their hands.
We'll have more from Bharavi Desai of the New York Taxi Workers Alliance after headlines. News of the attack came as a new coalition was launched to support the proposed Islamic Cultural Center. New York Neighbors for American Values is made up of over 40 organizations, including Muslim, Jewish, and Christian groups. Donna Marsh O'Connor, a member of the September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, whose daughter was killed on 9/11, pledged her group's support.
There are many 9/11 family members who, while we understand the pain caused by some family members speaking against this, that we 100% fully support the Islamic Cultural Center in New York City, 2.5 blocks and around the corner from Ground Zero.
Imam Abdur Rashid of the Islamic and Leadership Council, meanwhile, said the controversy around the site is fueling anti-Muslim acts nationwide.
There have been attacks on masjids, there have been vandalizations, there have been physical assaults on individuals. This thing is escalating because of the dialogue and because somber minds are not prevailing in this country. And so we're concerned about it, but, you know, our silence for so long has been our consent, you know, that they can do whatever they want, but we're not going to be silent no more.
More anti-Muslim incidents are being reported around the country as the mosque controversy grows. On Wednesday, police in Madera, California, said they've been investigating recent vandalism at a local mosque as a hate crime. Signs were left at the Masjid Madera Center reading, quote, "No temple for the God of terrorism at Ground Zero," and "Wake up America, the enemy is here." The signs were credited to a group calling itself the American Nationalist Brotherhood. A brick was also thrown at the center last week. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, local officials have rejected a building permit for a new mosque in the town of Mayfield. A local Somali group had sought to build the mosque, but the Mayfield Zoning Board rejected the application by claiming there's insufficient parking space. According to local press reports, cheers broke out after the board announced the decision to a packed hearing. The American Civil Liberties Union says it's monitoring the case to determine if ethnic bias is involved. Two of President Obama's top environmental advisors have admitted they were excluded from the decision-making process behind the expansion of offshore drilling earlier this year. In a move criticized by environmentalists, the White House opened large swaths of the Atlantic, Gulf, and Alaskan coast to offshore oil and gas drilling. The move came just weeks before the BP oil spill in the Gulf set off the largest environmental disaster in U.S. history. On Wednesday, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Administrator Jane Lubchenco and Council on Environmental Quality Chair Nancy Sutley both said they had a limited role in the decision process. The disclosures came in testimony before the Presidential Commission investigating the oil disaster. The panel's co-chair, William Riley, criticized the White House for ignoring its top environmental officials.
I'm disappointed that a policy to expand so significantly the area of offshore oil and gas would not have involved direct consultation with the CEQ chair.
72 dead bodies have been found on a Mexican ranch near the U.S. border in what's being described as the single deadliest attack of Mexico's drug war. A wounded survivor told police the killers had identified themselves as members of a notorious drug gang called the Zetas. The head of Mexico's National Security Council, Alejandro Purim Romero, said the victims were undocumented immigrants from several Latin American countries.
Yesterday, the Marines repelled an aggression by alleged organized criminals during an operation in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, where 72 people were found dead, 58 men and 14 women. And according to preliminary information, that needs to be confirmed. They could be illegal immigrants of several nationalities, including El Salvador, Honduras, Ecuador, and Brazil.
The Pakistani government has ordered the evacuation of 3 towns in southern Sindh province as surging floodwaters threaten more devastation. The towns have a combined population of around 400,000. The UN, meanwhile, is estimating some 800,000 Pakistanis are now entirely cut off by the floods and can only be reached by air. In Somalia, at least 6 people were killed and 25 people injured Wednesday in fighting between African Union-backed Somali forces and Islamic fighters. The clashes follow Tuesday's hotel suicide bombing in Mogadishu that killed 38 people, including 8 members of the Somali parliament. The ousted former Honduran president, Manuel Zelaya, is renewing criticism of the Obama administration's support for his successor, Honduran President Porfirio Lobo. Speaking to Democracy Now! In Espanol and Spanish, Zelaya said U.S. backing for Lobo is subverting Honduran democracy.
If the United States were not protecting Lobo and protecting those responsible for murders and crimes,